We're starting a new series here in the fall called The Scoop. I'll pick a new topic every week to share with you. And my intent is to start the discussion, the first 10 or 12 minutes of it, sharing some insights, sharing some best practices, and some of the things that I've learned, not just in running my own business for over 15 years, but in working with dozens of other business owners over the course of that time in coaching and consulting capacity. My hope is that you will grab some shortcuts that you can implement immediately in your business to make a difference in your bottom line, to make a difference in your recruitment and retention efforts, to make a difference in just how much joy you experience working at your companies and being in business, at how much leverage that you have in your day. Anything that has to do with leadership, marketing, that's the intersection that I love. And so one of the things that I'll ask you to do as you participate in the scoop is to not just absorb the material from today, but give me suggestions on material that you would like to see. I'm taking requests. I'm hearkening back to my radio days and taking requests. So if there's something that is got you stuck in your business, maybe I can help grease the wheels there. Maybe I can help you get some forward momentum, and I would love to do that for you. So you can drop an idea into the chat today if you want to, or you can email whitney@provokebetter.com and give me an idea for a topic that you'd like to hear for an upcoming scoop. I decided to start the series talking about generosity because that is something that, particularly over the last year, I have found over and over again to be not just good for my karma, but good for my business. It helps me get out of my own head when I'm thinking about other people. And feeling generous and expressing that generosity is the best way for me to do that. I will borrow a phrase that I heard from Marlene Young, who is a leader here in Frederick County, Maryland. I saw her at an event that the Chamber of Commerce hosted a few weeks ago called She Week, and they were talking about paying it forward, this idea of generosity that maybe we have benefited from, and we're paying it forward sometimes in very specific ways to the individual in front of us, and sometimes in less specific ways just to the community at large. Marlene Young said, generosity, paying it forward, doesn't start with a checkbook. It starts with a mindset. And I couldn't agree more with that. I think that we have to start thinking generously first before we start participating generously. And generosity does not always mean I'm writing a check, or I'm paying for a big gift, or I'm doing something wild and extravagant. And so today I will share with you 3 different types of truths, 3 rules, if you will, that I found to be the case for generosity, along with some examples of how I've seen each one of these play out in my business and the businesses that I work with. And then as we transition from the simultaneous LinkedIn Live and Zoom recording or Zoom stream just to the Zoom, when we get just to the Zoom, then I'll be able to share some suggestions with you in a more fluid way as I take some questions or what ifs and how would you addresses from the Zoom audience and see what I can do to help you there. Eugenia, if you haven't done so already, Eugenia, again, my action agent on my team, go ahead and drop the Zoom link into the comments in the LinkedIn segment, if you don't mind, so that anybody who might be joining us on LinkedIn can find us also directly on Zoom when the live stream over on LinkedIn ends. We'll see if this works the way that I hope it will. So the first rule about generosity in business and how it can help you in your business is that every action we take will cause a response action in someone else. I mean, that's just, you've known that since you were kids, right? Well, researchers in Switzerland have actually done some research that backs this up, and I'll read a short segment from the research results. They found that those who have felt others' generosities are more likely to be generous themselves. Seems common sense, doesn't it? It means if you're generous with your clients, your partners, your employees, if you put in that little extra effort, that is more likely that they will return the favor. You reap what you sow might be another way to think about this. So let me give you some examples of what that might sound like. If you're generous with somebody in a prospect meeting, they're more likely to be generous with you in how responsive they are to your offer and how truthful they are in sharing with you what their needs are. If you're generous with a client in the course of your relationship, You help build loyalty. You help build trust. You help build an advocate and potentially a good referral source, because the law of reciprocity says when I'm kind to you, you're more likely to be kind to me. Now, I don't want anybody to hear this and think, oh, well, she's trying to get under my skin. This is manipulative. If that is your mind state, please don't do this, right? Again, paying it forward doesn't start with a checkbook. It starts with the mind state. And as much as possible, I always encourage you to be doing that with an open heart, not thinking I'm doing this so that I get that. You've tainted it if you do that. You've already poisoned the well. Just be generous because you want that energy, that karma, if you will, to go out into the world. I think you reap what you sow. What you put out will come back to you. So put out as much generosity as you can. Some examples of small gifts that can help open the door in a new relationship. I was consulting with a technology client about 2 years ago now, and they are in the energy space. What they do is they help large corporate buildings provide more energy efficient solutions, track where the energy is going, where energy is leaking essentially from the building, and then find ways to correct it. They were having trouble breaking through the door to get to the engineers. The building engineers and the building managers were typically the people that they started this conversation with, because those men and women were the ones who were responsible for the buildings. Well, the building engineer, the building manager, they're not usually sitting at a desk. They're not emailing a lot. They're not at their phones a lot. And so getting to that key decision maker had become a problem for this technology company in the energy space. So what we did is we came up with this idea that provided a bit of generous gift that was very low cost to those engineers. We said, what is it these engineers, these building managers want? Well, they probably want a break. They probably want somebody to pay attention to them and take care of them for a change. What if we got donuts and we just spontaneously showed up at the buildings that we've identified would be great prospects for us, and we said, hey, we brought so-and-so a dozen donuts. Are they available? Now, what have we done? We're probably hitting the receptionist, and the receptionist is like, okay, there are donuts here. This is a little out of the ordinary. So we've already broken through the noise. Secondly, we've arrived with a gift. Now, what does a dozen donuts cost? It's pretty inexpensive. And then we added to that a little bit of marketing savvy that drew in this idea of the donut and drew a line between it and this energy solution that the company was doing. We just made a very simple postcard that went with the donut box. So in case that donut box couldn't be hand delivered to the recipient, the receptionist would deliver it with this little postcard type thing that gave it context. And the postcard basically said, are there holes in your energy solution? So we came up with a fun way to tie those two ideas in together, and on the back of it, it was just an invitation to say, hey, we'd like to have a conversation with you about that and show you how our solution can help pay for itself in less than a year and contribute to 15% ongoing annual savings. Pretty compelling offer. The company that did this got, I think it was about 15 dozen donuts. And they had figured out a route to get around the Baltimore and DC area where these large buildings were to the prospects that they had previously identified. They'd been reaching out to them but had been unsuccessful. In the course of a day, they did all of the deliveries for these donuts. They got to meet with about 70% of the engineers or building managers that had been impossible to get a hold of before. And from those initial conversations that just, hey, we wanted to stop by, bring you some donuts, let you know that we're here. This is the solution we're working on. This is what we found it to be beneficial in other buildings. Not a big thing today, but if you want to schedule a time for us to demo it, my information's on the back. Have a great day. For those conversations that they had, they scheduled 4 demos in the first 2 weeks. They were able to break through the noise and get more response through that one day of doing hand deliveries of very low-cost donuts than they made in the 3 prior months trying to get a hold of these very same people. And how did it start? It started with a posture of generosity. So think creatively. How could you incorporate that small gift? P.S. I thank my buddy Karen Justice for this. She always recommends sending out thank you notes in November instead of holiday cards in December. Now, why is that? Everybody sends the holiday cards in December. Everybody sends the end of year cards at the end of year. And so your message is out there with everybody else's message. But if you back the timeline up a little bit and express your gratitude, you're generous with your expression of your gratitude in November, you could tie it in with Thanksgiving if you wanted to, but you're getting ahead of all of that stuff, and potentially you're talking with the decision makers, you're making a wonderful impression with them before the end of the budget year ends in many cases. So if they have a little money to spend, now you're top of mind, or if they're in discussions for budgeting for next year, once again, you're top of mind and everybody's smiling as they think about you. So rule number 1, practice the law of reciprocity, knowing that every action you take will be met, most likely, with a similar action. Number 2, truths of being generous. Being generous can cost you next to nothing and yet convey huge value. The donut initiative that I just described to you is a great example of that. But you can get really creative in other added value ways and still make a great impression. From the hospitality industry, I have 2 examples. One of our clients is Catoctin Wildlife Preserve in Thurmont, Maryland. And they have birthday parties that they'll host at the zoo for the kids that want to be there. The parents that are bringing all of their guests to the preserve for the birthday parties are already spending a great deal of money. Sometimes a little extra money is tough for them to get, but what they found is that they could upgrade the packages if they include special experiences or special access for the birthday kid that didn't really cost the preserve anything. What they did is they got these little kind of pith helmets, and the birthday kid got a pith helmet. Now, what does that do? It sets them apart right away. It makes sure that all the staff in the park know if they're wearing this helmet, they're a birthday kid. So Whitney gets a happy birthday every time she passes a staff member. Hey, happy birthday. Hey, happy birthday. So they're feeling great. That pith helmet was probably $2.50. And that at any of the special shows, like the educational programs that they had, they could have VIP seating right there in the front. Again, didn't cost the preserve a cent, but now the birthday kid and 8 of their guests are sitting right there in the front row. So they've got that access they couldn't otherwise buy. And if there was an opportunity to get a volunteer from the audience to help with the chinchilla or the baby alligator, guess who got to come up on stage in their pith helmet for an amazing photo that mom and dad are almost guaranteed to share on social media? It's going to be Birthday Whitney up on stage to hold that baby alligator. Huge added value, didn't really cost the preserve anything. But to that family, to that birthday kid, it was an experience they couldn't otherwise purchase. It was access and recognition and a memory that is going to stick with them forever. Generosity can come just as easy as that. Different example from the hospitality industry comes from a campground that I work with. They have camping rentals, RVs. They don't do tent camping, but it's RVs and small cabins. And for years, every time a guest checks in, they've had fresh cookies to share with their guests. It's marvelous. Again, doesn't really cost them anything, but they're nicely packaged. They have a beautiful little cellophane bag that they put them in, and there's a tag on it. As we were working together, I reminded them that the tag is sometimes the thing that people will photograph. So make sure the tag is beautiful, is branded, and provides a hashtag that the campground wants the guest to include in the post. Now you've given them all of the ammunition, the guest, all of the ammunition they need to help advocate for you. In addition to that, for the cabin rentals, I said, well, let's create a few more Instagram-worthy moments. What if when the guest arrives inside the cabin, you've got a little whiteboard or a chalkboard where you've written their name on it? Welcome, Whitney and guests. Hope you enjoy your weekend. That little chalkboard, that little piece of chalk, 1 per cabin. Again, $2 or $3 to do that. But guess what I'm doing as soon as I get in? My name is there. Dale Carnegie taught us that. There's nothing more beautiful than our own name. My name is there, and I'm going to take a picture of that. And guess what goes out in social media? So that generous act made it very, very easy for people to share our message and create that connection between the experience and the brand. Beautiful examples, cost them next to nothing to do. Third example, from technology. Trial periods are great examples of that. Customer calls are great examples of that. I've got an IT client who does what he calls can't fail calls about once a month with the people that he's working with. And another no-code workflow solution company does monthly mastermind calls. So they do small group calls with their users, particularly their high use users. And what they found is not only are they reinforcing the two-way relationship that this no-code workflow solution company has with their customers, but they're getting from these high usage customers some amazing feedback on their products that has actually influenced the trajectory of upcoming features and solutions. So that little investment that they spend in time pays huge dividends, not just in customer loyalty, not just in potential referral sources, but in innovative ideas for how to continue to make their product even better, even stronger. Third and final generosity tip is just that generosity can come in many forms. We've already shared some examples about how generosity doesn't necessarily have to be a gift that I could hold in my hands. Generosity can also be knowledge, like the conversation we're having right now. It could be extra time that you're giving. It could be patience. It could be mentorship, probably a dozen different things. So think about how generous you can be with prospects, with customers, and with employees. And this is the one that I want to focus on in this example. A friend of mine said to me years ago, how you part ways with employees can say a lot more about you than how you started the relationship. Always be just as generous as you can with them on their way out the door as you were when they came in the door. Now, in today's climate, I know a ton of businesses are struggling with employee recruitment and retention. If you're being generous as you can be with your employees while they're employees, they're much more likely to stay. And even if they leave, they're much more likely to think and speak of you fondly and potentially bring other people to you even as they're leaving your organization. They didn't necessarily leave for bad reasons. Maybe the spouse got reassigned and they're moving out of the area. Maybe they are having a kid and deciding they want to take time off, right? There are a million reasons that you can leave an employee on good terms. But if you're generous with them during their employment, you're going to make that great relationship stick long after the paychecks stop coming. And again, generosity doesn't have to start with your checkbook. Right now, I think there's an overemphasis on signing bonuses and the say 3 months and we'll give you this other onboard bonus. And then what happens to all the employees who have been there loyally doing what they need to do for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years? Did you suddenly forget about them? It's like all the brand new customers at the cell phone companies that get all the best deals, but the long-term customers, well, they don't. What am I, chopped liver here? They don't get any of the good deals. So think about how generous you may be with your employees. Are you giving them access to mentorship? Are you giving them access to professional development opportunities and a stipend to do that? Even as a small company, I never had more than 10 employees, but we made room for those employees to experiment with different techniques, for them to attend seminars and workshops and webinars and conferences, and we supplemented their time and their registration costs to go do that. Because without fail, when we did, they came back smarter. They came back with something that they could share with the rest of the team. They came back with something they could apply to a new project. They came back with something they could wow a client with. Always, always, always. I never regretted that decision. How generous are you being with your professional development allocations for your employees? How generous are you being when they make a mistake? How generous are you being when they risk and fail? I remember very clearly a conversation I had with Flying Dog Brewery, and I point because it's just down the road from where I live in Frederick, Maryland. And Flying Dog has a perspective that they share with all of their employees that says, if you don't screw up every now and then, you're probably not trying hard enough. You're probably not innovating enough. If you never make a mistake, you're playing it too safe. So generosity there could be, well, what are the guardrails? Are your guardrails like this, that your people are just in this very specific slot and they cannot innovate and they cannot ask questions and they cannot risk anything? In some industries, I could understand why that would be the case. But in many industries, we can build trust, and over time, we can widen those guardrails. And even if somebody, bumps around a little bit, it doesn't mean the end of the relationship. Just be as gracious and generous with them as you would want someone to be with you, and see how much more loyal you get, okay? Excuse me. And remember that how you part ways with them is going to say as much about you as how you brought them in. So even after they've given notice, can you be generous with a recommendation? Can you be generous with understanding what they need to move on and be successful in their next position? And as a leader of an organization, I've had many employees who, after a period of time, have learned everything that they can learn from me, and they're ready to go stretch their wings someplace else. And I take that as a win. Of course I miss them. Of course I miss their talents. Of course I miss their contributions to my company. But in some ways I feel kind of, that little proud mama moment that's like, hey, you know what? You got that because of everything I helped you learn here. And that's a different sort of generosity that I will never regret. I always feel good about that. So those are some 3 practices of generosity, all that start with a mindset and not a checkbook. And I hope in that you found a few examples and a few ideas for how you can utilize generosity in your own business. I'm going to stop the live stream over here on LinkedIn now, and we'll continue right here on Zoom for a little while longer. I would like for you to ask any questions that you have. If there's a scenario coming up in your businesses where you have a question, well, how could I do this or how could I do that? This is the perfect time to do it in our small group. And again, I promise no one will throw tomatoes at you through the webcam, okay?